lots of visitors that come to us at night. Even food fairies come at night. All right. Today, but before Santa comes, we need to remember what's really important. In just a minute. Be patient. Today we want to remember what's really important about today. What is it? Be nice today. Why? Who was born? Jesus was born today. Well, today. He's born at night. Yes. You can be technical. Okay. All right. And I want you to tell me the story about Jesus being born, but you know what you're going to do first? Is I hid some things around the altar. There's Mary, there's Joseph, there's 2 sheep, there's a donkey, there's a cow, and there's a shepherd. So would you like to go up and look around and see if you can find them? Oops, careful, don't knock each other down. Okay, Nathan found the sheep. Oh, let's leave it. Yeah, let's get the sheep here. Okay, Nathan. Okay, Nathan, why don't you hold on to Mary? You found Mary, good. Hold on to a minute. Let's gather around the table after you found the donkey. You found the sheep. Okay. Did you find anybody else here? We still need. Anybody find Joseph? No. And we need a shepherd. Do we have a shepherd here? No. There you go. There's the shepherd. That one was hard. Well, I have to be a little tricky. Okay, we're going to put the straw there. Okay, let's leave that straw up here. And we're going, this is a straw, because what is this? Where is Jesus born? In a manger. So let's put the animals in the manger. And you put the donkey and the 2 sheep. Okay, put them up there. Okay. Okay, okay, good job. Perfect. Okay, then what happened? What town was Jesus born? Bethlehem. And so Mary and Joseph were traveling to Bethlehem. And what happens when they travel? Do they have a place to stay? No, the town was so full of people, they had no place to stay. So where did they have to go? In a stable. Yes, they had to go where the animals were. So let's put Mary and Joseph on the table. Did we find baby Jesus yet? No. No. We better find baby Jesus. Shepherds out in the fields, and who came and talked to them? Who came and talked to the shepherds and told them about Jesus? Angels in the sky came and said, you have to go where? You have to go see Jesus. You have to go see baby Jesus. The Son of God is born today. So the shepherds came. What? Where did I get all that? That was the manger stuff I did when I was a baby. born, okay? And there are all the Mary and Joseph and the shepherds and the animals all there.
Mom and Dad?
That's right, that's his mom and dad.
And is this
That's a shepherd who came to see the baby. That's Joseph, right? That's Mary. Okay, now wait a minute, don't go. You know, there's something you've been waiting for that you keep asking for. Before you go down and sit, okay, everybody sit down and sit. I have something, okay, I have a treat for you, and somebody else left you a treat, too. And so you have some treats today. Okay, you can have a package of M&Ms, and you can have a candy cane. Merry Christmas, everybody. I think an advent cane will less than M&Ms. Candy canes are moved. You're welcome. Instead of a sermon today, I have a story for you. Do you remember, you might have heard the story, it's an old Russian story, the famous author Leo Tolstoy wrote it, and I just updated it. I revised it in honor of Tolstoy for our time and our place, and so I'd like to read you a story today. Once there was a farmer who lived exactly halfway between Thornton and Rockwell. He was retired from farming, but he still loved to help his renter with the planting and the harvest. His wife had died the day after Christmas the year before. His children lived scattered around the country. The children, their spouses, and the grandchildren came every other year for Christmas. This was the year they would all be with their in-laws. Besides, they had come so often the year before to help him care for his wife as she became more and more sick with cancer. And they had a sad Christmas last year, knowing she could leave them at any moment. He could hardly blame them for not wanting to spend Christmas in this house that death had so recently visited. But he didn't want to spend Christmas in the house alone either. The memories of those last days seemed to come back to him in detail as Christmas grew closer. Last year at this time, I was sitting and holding her hand with hospice workers and children and grandchildren hovering around us. Now the house seemed so empty and lonely. He knew his friends would take him in for a few days if he asked, but they had their own families to celebrate. He didn't want to intrude. As he went to bed that night before Christmas Eve, he prayed, "Jesus, just come and take me home to be with my wife. I can't take this loneliness and sadness any longer." As if in response to his prayer, he heard a voice talking. At first he thought he had left the TV on, but no, the voice was right next to him, talking softly in his ear. He was so startled he jumped and frightened the dog off the end of his bed. The dog began to bark, thinking it needed to protect him, but the voice was still at his side. It said, "I am with you. You are not alone. I am always with you. I am Jesus. I will come to visit you tomorrow, and we will celebrate Christmas Eve together." The farmer tossed and turned all night. Maybe he was dreaming or losing his mind, but no, he had been wide awake when he heard the voice. He finally dozed off towards morning, but awoke early, eager to discover what the day would bring. The farmer was afraid to leave the house in case Jesus came, but he needed to cook a feast. He couldn't serve Jesus the leftovers in his refrigerator. He decided that even Jesus wouldn't come this early in the morning. So he got in his truck and went to Hy-Vee, filling his cart with food, not caring about the cost. He chatted and laughed with other shoppers and the woman who checked out his groceries as he hadn't done in a long time. He gulped when he looked at his bill, but then remembered that no expense was too great for Jesus. The farmer wished everyone around him a Merry Christmas and hurried to his truck and rushed to get home. The farmer could see his road from the kitchen window. His living room window looked out over all his land. He unloaded groceries and began preparing a huge meal. He had learned to cook when his wife was diagnosed with cancer. She was so tired from all the chemo that he decided to learn to cook so she wouldn't feel as though she needed to cook for them. With the help of the Food Network, he had become a pretty good cook if he didn't say so himself. While he was in front of the kitchen window washing and chopping vegetables, he noticed a car driving too fast for the icy roads. As he looked, the car began sliding all over the road and finally went into his ditch. With a sigh, the farmer put on his jacket and warm gloves and found his chains and drove his truck down the long driveway to the car in the ditch. Kids, he thought as he slid down into the ditch to see if they were all right. He opened the driver's door to find 4 young people rubbing their heads and looking confused. He asked them their names and discovered that he knew the families of 2 of them. They were college students trying to get home for Christmas. He told them to go into his house and rest while he pulled their car out of the ditch. Then he called the 2 families he knew to tell them what had happened. He went into his house to find the 4 on the couch huddled around the fire in his fireplace. They were embarrassed at what had happened and wanted to hurry away, but because they had bumped their heads, he didn't want them driving home. They looked hungrily at all the food he was cooking, so he told them to sit down and wait for a parent to arrive. Then he gave them some of the soup he was cooking and the homemade bread he had made for Jesus. About 20 minutes later, he had not just one parent picking up the kids, but the parents of all the kids standing in his living room, thanking him and hugging him. He felt he needed to be a good host, so he offered them the snacks and cider he had made for Jesus. Soon they were all laughing and telling stories about harrowing drives in the snow as they traveled to relatives' homes for Christmases over the years. As the farmer watched everyone go out his door and get into their cars, he looked at the clock. It was 2 o'clock in the afternoon and his food was depleted. He had better begin cooking more food. Surely Jesus would come as most guests would come at a dinner party, probably an hour or so before dinner. About an hour later, the farmer heard his phone ringing. Now what? He thought, the kids have already called to wish me a Merry Christmas. They won't call again until tomorrow. Who could this be? He answered his phone to a woman crying. He knew who she was, the young girl who lives 2 miles down the road. She's a single mother with 5 kids and never seems to have enough food, or needs a ride because her car broke down again, or needs help for countless other reasons. She was a bit of a problem in the area and often fodder for gossip. Who was the latest boyfriend? Was she pregnant again? Why didn't someone do something about her? She rented an old farmhouse that always needed repair, and she was often behind in rent. When the farmer heard her crying voice, he braced himself and asked, "What's wrong this time, Sarah?" She tearfully told him how she thought she had finally met a nice guy, but she came home from work today to discover not only a Christmas breakup note, but he had stolen all her kids' Christmas presents. She didn't know what to do. The other neighbors had politely hung up on her. The farmer didn't know what to do either. Those kids with no presents pulled at his heartstrings, but Jesus was coming. He couldn't leave. He told Sarah he would see what he could do and hung up the phone. He tried to forget her, but all he could see were the faces of those cute kids crying because Santa didn't come. He couldn't stand it. For the 3rd time that day, he got into his truck and drove to Walmart. He filled the cart with toys as he tried to think what ages the kids were and what they might like. After consulting a few sales clerks and discussing what kids today like, he took his overflowing cart to the checkout and again found himself chatting with the other people in line and the sales clerk. Everyone wondered why he had saved so much of his shopping to the last minute. The clerk heard him explain what he was doing and gave him a discount on the toys. He still gulped when he saw the total on the register screen. For the 2nd time that day, he wished everyone around him in the store a Merry Christmas and hurried home. On his way, he thought about Sarah and the kids and figured they didn't have very much food for a Christmas celebration, but he wasn't going back to the store. He stopped at his house and packed up much of the food he had been cooking and took it all to Sarah's house. He helped her hide the toys and filled the kitchen with food. She was crying again and hugging him in gratitude. He awkwardly turned her back and hurried home. He hoped he hadn't missed Jesus. The farmer began cooking dinner again. His supplies were getting low, but he managed to put together a pretty good feast for Jesus. He looked at the clock and was surprised that it was 7 o'clock by now. Where was Jesus? Maybe he liked a late dinner. The farmer anxiously watched out the window. No one came by. If Jesus had come early enough, he was hoping to take him to the candlelight service at church. That would give his neighbors and even the pastor something to talk about. He daydreamed about walking with Jesus into the church and seeing everyone's astonished reaction. I bet the pastor would let him do the preaching, he thought. He'd probably have to. She would be in shock. The doorbell rang and woke the farmer from his daydreams. He looked at the clock. It was 8:30. Finally, Jesus was here. He was so excited he couldn't get to the door quickly enough. He eagerly opened the door, but it wasn't Jesus. A very dirty, partially toothless man stood there with a backpack, shivering, barely able to stand and almost frozen to death. The farmer was so surprised it wasn't Jesus at his door that he didn't think about his safety or the kind of person he was letting into his house. He helped the man into his house, took off his backpack, and sat him in front of the fire. The man was so cold he was in danger of going into hypothermia. The farmer peeled off his frozen layer of clothes and put him in a hot shower. He put out a clean towel and some of his clothes for the man to wear when he got out of the shower. The man smiled when he came out of the bathroom, looking better, but still shivering. The farmer looked at the clock. It was 9:30. It was so late. Jesus must not be coming. He had the man sit down at his table, and the two of them ate the feast he had prepared for Jesus. The man was so grateful and embarrassed the farmer. He learned the man had wanted to see his sister for Christmas. They hadn't been together for many years. He had been a homeless alcoholic for a long time, but had finally beat the booze thanks to the help of a social worker who took him under his wing, seeming to really care about what happened to him. The man was still homeless, but he finally found the courage to go see his sister, even if she turned him away. The farmer asked him where his sister lived and where he had walked from. The man said his sister lived in Forest City and he had been walking for the past 2 weeks from down south. The farmer sighed, asked the homeless man if he had an address or phone number for his sister. The man shuffled through his backpack and found the address and phone number. The farmer decided he better call the sister to see if she wanted to see her brother. The farmer was surprised as he talked to the homeless man's sister. She was relieved and excited that her brother was all right. She had worried for years that he would die in a gutter and she would never know what happened to him. The farmer offered to drive the man to her house. So for the 4th time that day, he got into his truck and drove the grateful, tearful, homeless man to his sister's house in Forest City. As the farmer watched the reunion of the two siblings, he was moved to tears himself. The sister invited the farmer into her family Christmas celebration. He almost said no, but he looked at his watch. It was about 11 o'clock. Jesus had stood him up. He went in the house and was surrounded by happy, grateful people who treated him like a king. He felt he had made some lifelong friends by the time he left, about 1 in the morning. The farmer drove home slowly and carefully. Any other day, he would have thought this had been a good day, a surprising day, an amazing day. But all he could think about was his disappointment. Why hadn't Jesus come as he promised? As he drove into his driveway, he prayed, Jesus, why didn't you come visit me? Did I miss you when I was away from the house? Did I do something wrong by helping those people? Why? As the garage door opened, there was a light so bright it almost blinded him coming from inside his garage. He opened his truck door and fell on the ground in terror. When he found the courage to look out, the light had become warm and comforting. It had surrounded him. From around him in the light, he saw the images of all the people he had helped. Then he heard Jesus' voice say, I did come to visit you today. I came 3 times. The things you did for these, my beloved people, you did for me. The next morning, the farmer was up early and went to the Christmas morning service. He walked confidently into church, knowing Jesus was with him. But now he had no need to show him off to the congregation, because he knew Jesus was with them too. The end. Merry Christmas. And let's sing Go Tell It on the Mountain. Number 290, verses 1 and 2. was crucified, died, and was buried. He descended to the dead. On the third day he rose again. He ascended into heaven. He is seated at the right hand of the Father, and he will come to judge